Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Find and Follow podcast, where we are all about helping you find and follow Jesus in your everyday life. The three amigos are back at it. After a couple weeks off, we got Craig, Kyle, and Scott here at the podcast HQ.
Well, it's been a couple weeks off for you guys, but I feel like I've been off for a couple of months. I don't remember the last time I did a podcast. It's been a while.
Somebody could look right now, pull up on their phone and be like,
took a hiatus.
Well, we had some awesome stuff happening. We're going to get into it here.
We had some guests and stuff, too.
Yeah, I don't know when you were on last. It's been a while?
It's been a while.
Okay. I've missed you a lot on the podcast.
It's so good to be back.
Because I
Excuse
see
us.
you regularly. So
Our listeners need to just give us a moment here.
No, I see you pretty regularly. So
Yep, you do.
We stay connected. Yeah, podcast. We're gonna jump in. Jesus is sending out some disciples. We're gonna jump in. You were sent out.
I was
recently to Uruguay.
Uruguay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Uruguay.
Uruguay.
Yeah, Uruguay.
Uruguay.
Yep. It was a great trip.
That's hard to say. It's like Colombia.
Yeah.
It's not Colombia.
Correct.
Colombia.
Right? Colombia. We've had that discussion before.
Yep.
Man, and then we had UGM Camp. Kyle, what have you got going on this last month? We'll jump into today.
Oh man,
just catching
the whole
up.
month,
Summer stuff.
in dad life.
You guys are like emerging out of the whatever you want to call it, the early infant
Yeah, we
stage.
talked about it a little bit on the podcast that we're committed to the things that we're committed to. So, some parents.
Wait a minute, you're committed to things
Sorry.
you're committed to. That's real clear.
We
right
have
there.
we have values.
I'm really solid on the solid things.
We have values and boundaries as a family, and so some parents, and not to their discredit, but don't get out of the house, don't do date night, don't do anything for months, right? And we were really committed that, and we have a phenomenal support system.
There you go. Because it almost sounded like you were being careless for a second.
Yeah, we just leave. I mean, she's good. She's sleeping, right? We don't need to be there.
Yeah.
Right? I have an app on my phone.
Yeah, you got
This
a
sounds
camera.
like a shout out to the grandparents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we have been able to get out with friends, get out with each other, do stuff to an extent that seems amazing. I mean, it's to what we were doing as single people is obviously very, very different.
Yeah, you pump the brakes on the out and about.
Yeah.
Because you have to.
But yeah, baby's happy and healthy. Mom's doing better. Mom's still not working, which is great. Lindsay doesn't have to go back to work till November.
She did. I heard she did sneak in the
Yeah,
office.
so she works
a couple hours.
She works at a school, so the whole school startup stuff is always chaos and drama, and she is phenomenal at her job, and she's kind of the glue that holds a lot of it together. And so, not that the place burnt down or the building
They
fell
can't live
apart.
without.
Yeah.
Just say it.
So
they can't live without her.
So she had to do some stuff to make sure that the machine kept on moving down the road this school year.
Right. Yeah. And so let's jump in. Like, we're going to hopefully get into this section of scripture where it's recorded for us. Jesus is like rounding up his dudes, his apostles, and sending them out. But on that note, Craig, you got out. You went to South America.
I did.
Tell us about that experience. It's with Think Small, one of our partners who does do amazing work to help kids. And so, what were you guys doing? What were you up to? What was the mission you're on?
Well, the specific purpose of this trip was to do some in-person training because we'd been for months doing some online training on Zoom, and we got to a point where we needed to be in person with the team. So we went there, Montevideo, and the Uruguay team was all there assembled, and we did some in-person training and then helped them with their first outreach. And we're going to continue training on Zoom, but the team is coming together. It's going to be going to a variety of churches in the various towns where the team members live and where they're going to reach out. And when they go there, they train a church team to do outreach, to care for children, to intentionally help children avoid human trafficking, drugs and alcohol, have internet safety, avoid domestic abuse, know how to navigate that. Children are at risk, not only in Uruguay, but all over the world. And the statistics all very overwhelmingly point to the fact that when people come to Christ, they come to Christ somewhere between the age of 4 and 14 in the vast majority of cases, somewhere around 70 or 80%. And so that's when children are most open and receptive to the gospel, and they're in their formative years, and they're most likely to make a decision for Christ. And if we don't intentionally reach out to children in that age bracket, we're going to lose that generation because everything else is targeting them. I mean, the various movements in the world, like in Africa, the human trafficking targets that window. Human trafficking, I guess, all over the world, but it's very, very severe in Africa right now.
Yeah, and you say that, and I think that we, as Westerners, are like, "Amen, yeah, that makes sense." It's only amplified in third world countries and those types of places that the dangers, the things that are grabbing for their attention are just very different than we would think. Like, oh yeah, well, kids are getting into trouble and having bad influences. We think of our kids in school and different stuff like that. I can only imagine the dangers and the just the amplification of that in places like
right.
that.
To be clear, I mean, we have human trafficking issues right here in Spokane, but in places like the country of Chad, they just in 2021 they identified officially 12,500 kids that were trafficked, and that's just the ones they know about. And in the vast majority of those cases, they were taken over the border and sold in Cameroon and Nigeria and other places like that. And they get sold, for the obvious things, the child armies. That's not something we have here, but also prostitution, sex slaves. Both boys and girls. But the thing that's really horrifying is the fact that they sell some of them for their organs. There's a black market now for healthy organs that's unimaginable. $100,000 to $200,000 for a healthy organ, and so they just the kids killed and their organs are harvested, and if they don't sell, if the kids don't, they just leave them on the side of the road, and most of those, because they have no way to fend for themselves, most of them die.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that's going on in other places in the world.
And it's hard to really wrap, like you're saying, Kyle, wrap our brains around it if you haven't been out of the Pacific Northwest or the West Coast much to know really the culture of a lot of places. You're like, oh yeah, there's kids and there's families and it's just like here, and it's not. I mean, there's so many communities still around the world where kids are property.
Yep.
That their parents see them more as property or disposable in the sense of like, yeah, if they die or whatever, sure, it might be hard, but it's really a lot different. And even women, many communities still, women are less lower class. And so the idea of like, I'm going to sell my kid for a couple $100,000 for an organ, it's like it happens because that's just, you've probably shared on the podcast just where like people come to Christ, pastors even in other communities or people, and they're like, wait, you're not supposed to abuse your kids?
Right.
Yeah,
well,
I think we talked
normal.
about that. I mean, I told you just watching that video and just the distinction, women and children specifically, and you think of the progress we've made, again, in Western culture over the last even hundreds of years, even last few decades, and just those, women and children are treated lesser than, the value of women and children, and parents seeing the value of their kids, and to see some of those light bulbs come on for people like in this training, like,
right.
Oh wow, they're valued by God and loved by God and created equal as God. Like, oh, that's. I mean, like we would sit here and go, how would they not know that?
Yeah,
and
I'm glad we're saying these kinds of things because this is really the heart behind Think Small. We want people to understand that kids don't belong to the parents; they're entrusted to the parents, but they belong to God. They're God's kids, and all of us adults, whether we have kids or not, have a responsibility to protect those children and to do the things that we can to ensure their safety, as much as possible. And so Think Small does that, but at the same time, the ultimate objective is to introduce them to Christ and help them become new young followers of Jesus. And as a result of that, to the long game is to transform the nation, transform communities. And so we're excited about that.
I like how Think Small puts that in some of their stuff, that they talk about the very practical things that they're doing, health and safety and keeping them safe, what to do, stranger danger type thing, and, cleanliness and all that kind of stuff. But then the goal being like, well, we understand that the most eternally significant and the safest way to live life is with Jesus. And so that's ultimately the goal, with a lot of really, really practical stuff, which we all know that's what Jesus does. And the way that Jesus calls us to lead life is very, very practical and helpful. But understanding that at the end of the day, if you teach them how to, not get caught up in child trafficking, you teach them how to, safe touch and all that kind of stuff, and they don't know Jesus, there's still a big gap that they're missing.
Exactly. Well put. Here at Mission Church, 2 or 3 years ago, I think maybe 4, we focused on some statistics and what that meant for us as a church in regard to what's going on in the United States. 80% of the churches in the United States are plateaued or declining in size. And
Is that, you think is that what it was when we said? I wonder if that's updated from COVID.
Well, it might be even worse now.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. But at least 80%
Yeah,
plateaued or declining.
I think it's going to be hard to get stats from out of COVID.
Yeah.
It's just nuts.
But that's not the whole story, because not only is that true, but the median age in churches has been on the rise now for many years. The average or the median age, in other words, the congregations, even the numbers of people that are going to church on a regular basis or identifying with a local church gathering, those people are aging with that, over the years. And then on top of that, a lot of young people. I mean, that Pew Research has done a bunch of studies on this, and one of the statistics we ran across is about 59%, according to their research, of young people leave the church by the age of 15. They find it irrelevant and, not cool, and it's just not appealing, doesn't meet any felt need or whatever. And then of those that leave, only about 30% of that 59% actually come back to the church later on when they become adults or get married or start having kids and they start realizing the importance. And all of that to say, we have got to focus, we the church at large in the world, in every country it's true, we've got to focus on the youngest generation, because they're the future of the church in terms of its health and its ability to fulfill the Great Commission.
There's so many things. I feel like we just cannonballed into the deep end here. There was no ramp up, no banter. I do want to get to.
You were the one you started. You asked the question.
I know. We just we didn't.
How did you expect it to go? Like, hey, you just went on this life transforming trip that, like,
no.
The gospel of Jesus was
Again,
being
this
preached.
is the Find and Follow podcast where we wander.
Don't dive into
the best
the
of
deep
them.
end.
No, I do want. I'm trying to segue here.
It's fine.
Just hit the brakes and take a left. I do want to come back to several things you've said, but what did you find really surprising in maybe a positive light and a negative way when you travel to another country and then you find out, oh yeah, people here are people just like at home, and there's the gospel being life transforming. Like, what did you find was good surprising, maybe some shocking surprising?
What was shocking to me, going to Uruguay in particular, was the fact that it's a Latin American country, and I've been in Latin American countries several times over the years and have a feel for what to expect. And there's a lot of that. It feels Latin America in a lot of ways. Architecture, people, some of those subjective things that you get when you visit a country like that. But what surprised me is that it really is more European in terms of what's going on spiritually and culturally and even politically. It's a very socialist country right now, even though there's the Latin American culture and the deep Roman Catholic roots. It's a European country and very much embraces. In fact, they have laws against religion and churches and that kind of thing. And they're very much, they embrace just humanism and atheism. It's very prevalent in the culture. I didn't expect that.
So kind of spiritually kind of cold, would you say?
Oh, very much so, yeah. And a tremendous mission field. Most of the churches, there are a lot of churches in Uruguay. Most of them tend to be smaller, not very many big churches. The other thing that was surprising to me in a little bit of a negative way was Montevideo is this huge metropolitan area, right? There's 3.4 million people in Uruguay, and 1.5 of them, so nearly half, live in Montevideo, and the rest in the rest of the country. And so I'm expecting, when we went to Colombia, the three of us and the team from the church here, Bogota is a big city, and it feels like a big city. It's still Latin America, but
I think it's 10 million.
It's 10 million.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest cities.
One of the biggest. Yeah. But as you move around in Bogota, it feels like a big city. Montevideo never felt like a big city. We actually paid a few bucks and went on a little tour of the city, and there's 1.5 million people living in a town that feels like a town of 30,000 in Latin America. It's very surprising to me.
What'd you find encouraging, like on the spiritual front, from the people there?
The eagerness of our team members and the people that we associated with, they are very passionate about reaching their communities, about reaching children, about reaching children's families, about growing the kingdom, very willing to be taught and mentored and coached. And I was just very, very impressed with all the people that I interacted with. It was pretty amazing. And I had the privilege of being in some meetings with some key people in Uruguay. One guy, for example, he's the head of an alliance. He's the president of an evangelical alliance that has brought churches together for the first time in the way that they're being brought together, first time ever in the country of Uruguay. And these churches are all like committing to, hey, and it's not only churches, but other nonprofit organizations, Bible-based or Jesus-based organizations. And they're all saying, hey, let's work together instead of independent. Let's collaborate. Let's pool our efforts. And I love seeing that.
Yeah, that's called the kingdom of God.
It's called the kingdom of God. Yep.
We do try to make a lot of artificial distinctions. I mean, helpful to be in community and smaller groups, that kind of thing. But yeah, let's get together and help our country. So back to some of those key things that we were hitting, like the differentiation between other countries and children's rights or lack of any rights and women. What was you'd said that the team had already started to do some stuff for kind of training with their own church kids and stuff. Like, what's their goal? Is they have a vision for their own community, their own people. Like, what's their thought?
So they all have passion for seeing what we do with local churches in equipping them, empowering them, and helping them to do outreach and be very intentional in their evangelism in their community. They have a vision for that, that there would be a Think Small team in all the major cities in Uruguay, several teams in Montevideo. I mean, right now we have one team, right? So it's the beginning. But this is how it starts in every country. Yeah. It started that way in Burundi, and now in Burundi we have 4 teams, and we've seen over 200, I think it's 250 or more thousand children and adults come to Christ as a result of those outreaches over the space of about 10 years.
And that's how it started with Jesus. And, Matthew 10, he sends them out.
He starts with 12.
Right? He starts with 12, and then he sends them out, and he says, go to towns. And we can dive into some of the details. But then he says, look for a receptive person of peace or a welcoming person, someone that's receptive to the gospel, and then it's going to be that local person that continues the work of discipleship, not just preaching the good news and moving along. That's apostles. In case anybody's unclear, like an apostle is a person who is one of the gifts to the church, is a person who would go to a place that doesn't really have the gospel, doesn't really have the good news of Jesus, and preaches that, gets something new started. Correct. Where like pastors and teachers are more people who continue the work there that are the local people.
Right.
You were trying to jump in there?
No,
you got new glasses?
A while ago.
Man, I'm on, like maybe in the last couple of weeks when I was gone.
Nope.
Oh, rats. Look good though. Maybe in this lighting they look good. Maybe they're better, different. All right, sharp. Okay. Anyways, back to Jesus. So, did you have something you were trying to jump in there?
I just don't know if you're kind of weaving back in, or if we're diving into Matthew 10 a little bit. And I don't remember where we left off in Matthew 9. If we went all the way through,
we technically got through. But we said all the verses and all the numbers.
We did.
So if you're like officially trying to keep track, we did.
Well, I'm just saying
we didn't dive into it real deep.
I spoke on this while you were on vacation.
While I was gone.
This idea that Matthew 9, and you've made this point, the chapter delineations and verses are made up not by the gospel authors, but I think the end of 9 and 10 go together. Jesus says, hey, there's a harvest out there, and it's plentiful, but the workers are few. And so then he takes these 12 dudes. He's like, okay, go work. There's the harvest. Like
that's a good observation.
Those are tied together.
Yep.
And we say that a lot in church. Like, the harvest is plentiful, so go work. And so Jesus says, here's what I want you to do, and go out and do the work. And then he describes pretty specifically what that work is for them that he wants them to do.
Yeah, there's 43 of us that went on a mission trip in August too. we went to the far off land of Ford, Washington.
Exactly.
Whether
it's
different country.
Whether it's across the street or around the world.
Yeah, we took about 50 kids from Trent Elementary to Union Gospel Mission Camp, and 43 from Mission Church were part of helping out at registration, and many of those were up there the entire week. A few came up for days, and we just loved on kids, had fun, did activities, went fishing, floated the river, played field games, did arts and crafts. Rick Layton came up and was a cabin leader, and then built had like kids.
A lean-to? What would you call it?
No, it was a tower.
Tower.
Yeah, oh, yeah, there was a legit tower. They cut down trees, lashed them together, built a structure, built a platform enough that it was maybe 8 to 10 foot up in the air, and kids could climb up on it. Like within 4 days, 4 days, 1 hour a day, they built this tower.
Wow.
Like it was impressive.
That sounds like something Rick would do.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
But then we just, introduced kids to Jesus
Yep.
and led them to Jesus ultimately. More than having fun is, what profits a man if he gains the whole world but loses his own soul. And like you're saying, that 4 to 14 window is,
Yep.
as we all think about our story, like think about when you were that age and how you were influenced by the people who loved you really well.
Mm-hmm.
And then unfortunately, sometimes during that time, we are, people in our lives are harmful to us, cause trauma, pain, and destruction, and how that still shapes us years, decades later. It's like, oh, this happened when I was in middle school, and that still is the ripple effect that make waves. And we saw like about 10 kids come to Christ at UGM camp, and it was fun. It was awesome.
That is awesome.
And transformative, and some of them are connected to Mission Church, and we're going to continue to see fruit. And kids came back from last year, and it's a quote unquote missions trip. As you think about it's just people living on mission with Jesus, helping them find and follow, whether it's at school starting up this week and last week, or in your neighborhood, cubicle next to you, or if it's in South America or wherever.
Scott, I see a common thread in terms of what Mission Church did with the UGM camp, and a shout out to UGM for this program that they have. They fill the camp all summer long, where churches and organizations partner with local schools and provide a free opportunity for kids. I think it's an awesome program. But the common thread in that ministry, or with Think Small, and certainly here in Matthew 10, is that it starts with meeting a felt need. When Jesus sends them out, he says, heal the sick, raise the dead, cure those with leprosy, cast out demons, give as freely as you've received, and go and announce to them that the kingdom of heaven is near. So you're going to share the gospel. I mean, that's the reason I'm sending you out, Jesus is saying. But I want you to get people's attention by meeting actual needs in their life. And so you create a fun environment, UGM camp. The kids need camaraderie, a fun environment, a safe place to spend part of their summer or whatever. And Think Small does the same thing. It's like, hey, what do parents fear most? They fear that their kids are at risk. Well, hey, we're here to help. So we meet that need. Here he's saying, when you go to these cities, I mean, there's sick people and there's people that are needing deliverance and freedom. Meet those needs.
Yeah, and then he says, go in the authority that I have given you, right? He gives us the ability to, it'd be one thing if, and I think, again, the thing that sets Think Small apart from other, nonprofit organizations, UGM, is that we're doing it in the power and the authority of Jesus. So there's a whole nother level to that. I'm curious, Craig, if when you went on your mission trip, if you trusted Jesus enough to not take any money, you didn't carry a traveler's bag with you, no change of clothes.
Well, you had to go there,
no
didn't
sandals.
That was just specific for those dudes for that time.
I know. But the point I made when you guys were both on vacation is the reason he's doing that to those dudes in that specific time is because he does say, go in the power and the authority that I've given you. And he wants them to rely on that, not on their own strength. And not that that's you shouldn't have packed a change of clothes to go on a mission trip or even to, UGM. But I do think there's something to note there that specifically with those guys, he's wanting them to understand, hey, I've given you everything that you need for this trip. I mean, he does say talks about accepting hospitality and doing those things, but he says, hey, I don't want you to worry about these things. Here's the important things, and worry about those. And when you worry about those, I promise I'll take care of the rest, and helps him with that.
Yeah, he promises when you get arrested, here's what you do. Like that's up front, not if you run into some local restrictions or governments that are restricting where churches can meet or how many people. It's like he says, when verse 19, when they arrest you, do not worry about what to say or how to say it. I love this. At the time, you will be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. And he's saying, hey, you use this quote unquote negative experience along your journey as a really positive thing to like preach the gospel and be empowered by the Holy Spirit, the authority of God working through you, because he is working through you. Like, speak as though God is speaking through you, because God is speaking through you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so as we whether it's UGM camp, and we had some bumpy moments. There's a couple things you're like, but this opportunity to love. We had a couple sick kids and parents that were upset, and anyways, they don't have a relationship with us. They're trusting their kid to come. Some of these kids literally have never stayed a night away, and like their first time is going to be 4 nights at a camp.
Yeah.
And some
of them don't get cared for like they get cared for that week. You made the point, I think it was Sunday, about the kids that they were shocked that they could get seconds.
Yeah.
Like, can I have some more?
Yeah.
Really? I can have seconds?
And like every kid, it's growing and being active. They love to eat. But some of them, coming from a spot where it's just not a lot of food. And so this opportunity to eat, and we were super busy and active, and they were burning the calories. But definitely food insecurity is a thing. But anyways, my point was just this opportunity was kind of quote unquote negative, a couple of them. And it was this opportunity like, hey, we're just going to love. And I just said it to a couple of team members. We're just going to love. We're literally, and Jesus gets down here towards the end. It's like, hey, give somebody a cup of cool water. One parent came. It was 11:30 at night to come get their kid. They were just kind of distraught about their kid being away. Long story short, they wanted to come get him. Great, come get your kid. They didn't know where it was. I was like, here's the camp address. They show up kind of in a huff and a puff, if you will. But it's like, hey.
A huff and a puff.
Yeah. Anyways, just like they brought someone with them, a friend, and the friend was like, can I use the restroom? Sure, here's the restroom. I got a couple bottles of water. I was like, hey, do you guys need some water it's an hour drive for the ride home? And just trying to love them best they can in that moment, right? Here's this opportunity that feels real negative in the moment, but it's really an opportunity to love people. Because I don't know if you notice, sometimes people are prickly out there.
They're huffing and puffing.
It can be, and I'm one of them at times. Like, I think I'm the nicest guy,
never.
But I can be a little prickly for sure. But just opportunity to love people. We're always on mission with Jesus.
Yep.
Whether they're a receptive, desire to know God person, or they're kind of a prickly, I don't want to hear about your Jesus, and I don't want my kid to be part of what you're doing, and their kids are having a blast, having a good time, and they're like, I don't want to go home, but that's my mom. She's a little overprotective, and I've never been away from home, and it's been 2 nights. So, anyways, just this idea. I love that Jesus gets after sending people out, and that's for all of us.
Absolutely.
Right? At the end of Jesus' time on earth, he goes, hey, everybody, you have the authority, the power of the Holy Spirit. It's kind of one of those things that we don't all always feel and grab onto, but it's the truth. Like, you have the full authority of God, your creator, the power of the Holy Spirit to go and to do these amazing things that God calls us to do, whether it's across the street or across the world.
In our culture, we often talk about the ministry as a thing that I hear people talk. It's like I felt like I was called to the ministry, and then I went into the ministry, and I went to seminary, and then I was in ministry, and we talk about it as if it's an option, or if it's a thing that only a few people are called to. And I understand why we do that. It's a cultural thing, and it's.
I don't understand it.
Well, it's in our culture. People they separate leadership, pastors, and spiritual people, from what they would refer to as the laity. That's an artificial distinction. It's not biblical, but I understand it culturally. That's kind of what I think most people are referring to. Like, you're in vocational ministry. You get paid to preach or serve
some of
Jesus.
it's semantics, your favorite thing, Scott. That is
well, we all like to use good words.
What we say and what we mean, and
But where I'm going with that is, back to your point, Scott, earlier, we're all in full-time ministry, whether we know it or not. And it's not full-time vocational ministry.
Well, now everybody listening knows it.
Well, now they do know it.
So
And I think that's
there
where
you
your
go.
biggest pushback is, because I've literally had conversations. Yeah, I want to get back into ministry. I've been out of ministry for a while, and it's time to get back in.
It's very common.
And
Yep.
your comment, and I think the thing that you're saying is like, no, you're never not in ministry. Jesus calls you to be on mission with Him. So it's not like I'm working at a church or I have this job. Like we're all, I mean, and how we define ministry, I think, is where people are like, well, I'm not leading the ministry or working at the church. Yeah, but the ministry is the work of Jesus, and so you're called to that because, Jesus calls all of us.
Unless you quit on Jesus and don't
Yeah.
endure to the end, you can be out then, I guess.
I suppose.
Right?
Yeah, it's. I think sometimes we think, and some of our listeners may think this way, that we think that ministry has to be something specific or official, like I lead a Bible study, or I have an outreach, or I do a thing at the local school, or I serve at the church, or something like that. But ministry is anything that we do in collaboration with Jesus and in view of the ultimate objective of making disciples. I mean, that's what He said to do. Go make disciples of all nations. And how we do that is we preach the gospel, we love people, we meet felt needs. We do everything that we can to help them become Christ followers and to become Christ followers for a lifetime. And so anything that you're doing to help people along those lines, that's ministry. And it doesn't have to have an official title. You don't have to have a specific, thing that you do. It's how you influence people around you. And it'd be members of your own household, it'd be people in your work environment or people in your neighborhood, whatever it is. But ministry, I think we need to think of ministry more that way than in the typical cultural, vocational sort of way. I think so. I hear this a lot in the church, and you probably heard it too, you guys, many times over the years. I'm praying about the ministry God has for me, or I think God has a ministry for me, and I don't know what it is yet. And I would just encourage people to start with the things that we already know, not worry about what you don't know. What we do know is Jesus said, go and love people as I've loved you. This is my commandment. So start there. And then there's things like 2 Corinthians 5. He's given to us the ministry of reconciliation. Go help people get reconciled to God. Love them and help them realize God wants to be
but
their
those
friend.
are the far off prickly people that are kind of rude and annoying.
We did a series when I was first on staff called like Knowing God's Will or something like that, and you gave a message called God's Marching Orders.
Yep.
Like, hey, you don't know what's out there. You don't know specifically, maybe I think we have a little bit of new language around it now. Like you don't quite know where your sweet spot is, but here's what you do know, because God already said it. And sometimes I think with that, we go, God, what's your will? I don't know what to do. And then there's some things that's like, yeah, you should know. These ones are really, really clear. And God's already said, go do these.
Yep.
So like there's God's will specifically for everybody. And then there's some stuff that's for you and your sweet spot and your gifts and your passions and where all that lines up. And that could be a little harder and trying to figure out your personality and stuff. But there are some things that are really clear. And God was like, hey, here's what the mission is for all of us.
Yep.
And
I encourage people, do the stuff that you know to do. Love people, be a great representative of Christ in whatever way you can. I mean, do the stuff that's already very clear in Scripture. And then as you go, God will guide you, and you'll find your sweet spot eventually. And a trial and error process is quite okay. I'm sitting here looking at you, Kyle, and realizing that you loved
new
youth
sweet
ministry.
Glasses.
Yeah, great glasses. Look really good. No, you loved youth ministry. You had a long run as a youth pastor, longer than most youth pastors, and you absolutely loved it. You loved middle school students, high school students. You were very passionate, still are passionate about it, although that's not the role that you're in right now. And I think back to when I was in Bible college and I did a little of this and I did a little of that. I didn't know what my sweet spot was. I just knew I wanted to serve Jesus. And one of the things I volunteered to do at one of the local churches was to teach middle school students on Sunday morning in a Sunday school class. And I realized very quickly, I am not you, Kyle. It's like, okay, get me out of here.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with these guys. And I was that guy, right? We all grow up through those various, but now as an adult, a young adult even, I didn't know what to do with a room full of junior high kids.
Wasn't your sweet spot.
It was not my sweet spot. So I moved on to what are other things that were.
The other day I was at the Woodcraft, the wood shop. You ever been to Woodcraft?
In Spokane on Sullivan?
Yeah, over by
I've been
Fred
there.
Meyer. You
Never walked inside there.
Man,
I
it's
have.
great if you're looking for woodworking products, tools.
They got it.
Yeah. If you're looking to connect with like an older demographic of
I was going
guys.
to say, a bunch of
it's
grandpas.
A bunch
Yeah.
of retired hobbyists and
You know,
stuff,
you can buy a little block you can turn into a pen. or whatever, right? Some cool stuff.
A block you can turn into.
Like a wood blanket that you can carve. Anyways, some cool stuff. I could spend lots of money and lots of time in there. I was returning a product, the gel stain for the product didn't work. Anyway, so I was waiting in line. There's the guy in front of me talking to the cashier gal, and I walked in, and they're already talking about some project, something he's got going on. And she gives him a little tip, like, "Oh, hey, if you do this and that and the other thing, then that work." He's like, "Oh, I've never thought about that. I'm gonna, try that, and that should really help out." And they do the transaction, and then he moves along. And while we're standing there, as I'm looking back now, I was like, "Oh, it's for sure a God thing in the moment." I don't know if you have these regularly, but if you're waiting in line somewhere, it wasn't even like I'm trying to think of stuff. It just like God hit me with this. He goes. And maybe because I was in a wood shop carpentry thing, maybe it's because it was Jesus. I don't know. But he just goes, shows me this picture of so much of our understanding and idea of discipleship, of helping people truly follow Jesus, is a lot of what just happened right there with tips and tricks and 5-minute YouTube video. And a lot of this is great stuff. Or here's this book, or here's this 7 steps podcast about how to be a better disciple. Ready? Just listen to that. That's what will work. And this guy is going to take her little bit of information, try to go apply it. But when Jesus said, "Come follow me, be my disciple," they shared life together in a way that when Jesus was unfairly and unrightly, accused in public, and some guys railing at Jesus, about like how you're not right and you're a blasphemer and all that kind of stuff, the disciples were feeling and connected to and watched Jesus' response in that moment. And you can't get that through a book.
No.
The same way that Jesus, I'm sure, learned carpentry. Maybe he didn't need this. Maybe he's God in human flesh. And so
he made the trees. He knows how to cut them.
God in human flesh. You're not sure about that?
As far as learning the craft of carpentry, how do you become a craftsman? Is like, how do you learn all these tricks? You don't just hear about it and then go by yourself and try to apply it. And I think that is such our culture of what it means to follow Jesus is I show up at maybe a gathering, I listen to a teaching on YouTube, I read a book, and then I'm trying to apply it with myself and maybe my spouse or maybe a friend, but that's about it. But none of this communal life of like, well, what does Scott do when his kids are like frustrating him and he's at the end, he's tired and he's, just emotionally spent? Like, how is he loving his kids in that moment? Have you seen that? Have you experienced that?
Right. To go back to your example, maybe if we just speculate a little bit hypothetically here, a better approach would have been for the cashier to say to the guy, "I'll tell you what, I get off at 5. If it's okay with you, I'll come to the house and I'll show you how to do the thing that I just told you about. And I'll train you to be able to do it."
Sure.
And if I need to come a couple times over the next couple of weeks or
and
whatever.
even more than that, it's like sharing life together for 3 years.
Well, there's that.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. I was sitting there
discipleship.
listening to your story, and I full on couldn't tell where you were going. I was like,
That's where you got to stay engaged till the end.
yeah, no, I was just like,
Yeah.
but
Like,
yeah, and
the
we've-
idea of discipleship is far greater than tidbits or even an hour here or an hour there.
And we've talked about this, and even first century discipleship was more like this apprenticeship. That's the model is, hey, I do apprenticeships. You come work under me, and for 3 years, you don't have to ask the question because you watch me lathe this thing 1 billion times, so you know where the lathe goes and how all that. You were sitting there cleaning up the shop with me. You were apprenticing under me, and so. And we've talked a little bit about that. That's why I like those jobs that have this apprenticeship. It's like, yeah, because now you just spend time holding the wrench and watching how that goes, and you spent the time climbing up the ladder with them, and that's how you learn. And that's so valuable. And so Jesus' invitation to come follow me was not just, hey, come sit on the sidelines and watch. That was part of it. But it was, hey, you're right here. You're underneath, and you're learning, you're seeing. And then now he's like, you're doing. Go do the work.
Yeah. And they just went and did what they have been part of. They had compassion for women and children because they'd watched Jesus have compassion time after time after time. They preached this message of the kingdom of heaven is near because they'd heard Jesus. They're like, we're preaching Jesus number 11 here. You know what I mean? Like they just knew.
Right.
And their work is a little bit different. Their work was apostle type work where it was go and get something going, look for somebody. Bad news is verse 14, if anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, shake the dust off your feet when you leave that home or town. And Jesus saying, bad news for them. Better off Sodom and Gomorrah, the like wretched town and culture they had going.
I don't know if that gets your attention,
He
but it gets
compared
mine.
them to that, like,
Yep.
like Sin City. Better for the Strip, Las Vegas at 2 a.m. than the people who don't receive good news.
Is Las Vegas more of a sin city than any other city that there is?
I think so. Come
You
on
do?
now, let's be honest.
I don't know. I've been there. I mean,
Just
I
the
mean,
reputation.
I get the reputation, and
I'm
there's
just trying to make a point.
There are some things that are legal in Las Vegas that aren't legal in very many other places.
Right.
In Las Vegas,
Right.
I mean, every city has an underbelly.
Yeah.
But Las Vegas has got a bigger
The
underbelly
upper
than,
belly.
than a lot of cities.
They take their underbelly and put it out in the open.
Correct.
Okay.
They lead with it,
But-
especially at 2 a.m.
Where there's smoke, there's fire. They have a reputation in Las Vegas for a reason.
Okay. Just curious.
Anywho, my point being is their work wasn't to stay and like live life together 3 years or longer, and they were to get it going.
Right.
And then the growth of the local people who receive the good news and then continue to follow Jesus and track Jesus down and his followers throughout the region and connect with other people. And there's God-fearing people there who are like, oh, this is the Messiah, so we're responding to that. And so we continue to follow God through now the revelation of Christ. And so it's just different than, and I think it's disappointing to a lot of us when we go, oh, this is church and that's it. Like just kind of a little bit here, a little bit there, and like who am I really doing life with? And that's why we try to do our best with getting people, growing spiritually together. Get it, if you're like, I would like that, you're listening, like get a couple people and like get together and don't make it a huge production, but just encourage each other in the Lord, like where you're at and what God's saying to you and what you're doing. Like
Or do make it a big production if that's your thing.
if it is your thing, yeah. I'm just thinking a lot of us think we don't have the gifts in the talents, and we're not the ministers, and we're not the...
We don't have
yeah,
the
we
title.
Are. Yeah, we are. You're still Pastor Craig.
I am.
Yeah. Yeah. You tried to tell somebody the other day you're not their pastor.
I was just
And
thinking about that.
I was going to... See? And it wasn't the right time or place, but I was like, I was going to call you out in the moment, but I was like...
I thought about it even as I was saying
As
it.
you were saying, it came out, he said, I'm not your pastor, and I was like, we just got to keep walking. We were on a mission. And,
It was a funny, awkward moment, and
it
I was
was.
joking. But
it would have been
well taken
it would have
still.
been funny too. The moment have been like, come on now, Pastor. Oh man. So
You had to be there, Kyle.
No,
I'm sorry.
I'm there's so much going on there.
this is like the podcast because we've said a lot but not said a lot. Sometimes you're like, oh, let me tell you a story, but it's partial.
Mm-hmm.
It's because we don't have we're not Joe Rogan here. We don't have 4 hours.
I mean, we do.
We could, but we don't.
Yeah.
But try to land the plane here a little bit. So Uruguay was great. The work's there's getting going.
Getting going.
How great is it to be in person versus Zoom?
Oh my gosh, night and day difference. I'll tell you what, I got a new best friend. He's the pastor of one of the churches in Uruguay. His name is Anderson. And I'd seen him on Zoom for months. And it was great, but it's
Yeah.
just a face on a screen. And there's
An hour
minimal,
here, hour there.
Well, yeah,
Or
a couple
whatever.
hours every 2 weeks is what it was. But it's just a face on a screen. I mean, we sat at breakfast together, and I translated for him with Gary, the founder of the ministry. I was in training sessions with him. We had meals together during the training. We laughed and prayed together. Now when I
See,
see him on a
that's-
Zoom screen,
There's
it's like,
a relationship.
that's my friend
there.
Anderson.
Yeah, see,
I
that's
felt-
the point I'm making with the wood shop analogy. Like that's it.
I canceled my Zoom the other day and felt so good about it.
Yeah,
Stop
I had a
paying
meeting
for it.
yesterday that's been Zoom for two years.
Yeah, I
basically.
noticed you dressed up. Scott was all fancy dressed
Oh.
yesterday for his
We-
board meeting.
we
For
did have
Zoom?
No,
No,
for
'cause it was
we
in
got
person.
Oh, got in person.
We were in person a couple months ago for the first time really in 2 years, but not even everybody was there. But yeah, in person, you could smell people. It's great. You could like eat. We had lunch together, and yeah,
It's great.
So much
It's
better.
either great or not so great that you can smell them.
And that's because God designed us for community, right? For relationship,
Yes.
interaction.
And that's how we
And we
follow
saw that
Jesus.
so clearly through COVID and all the shutdowns. Like people were just struggling with isolation and disconnectedness, and we started to find ways to get connected and to be together because it's like, no, this is not how it should be.
I got this. I learned this new thing. This is just because it's a COVID thing. Dad, you probably know this. Do you know about? I'm looking it up here so I don't miss it. Point Roberts.
Yes.
Do you? So I didn't know this. Kyle, you probably know this. You're a smart guy. You have smart looking glasses. So when the 49th
Yeah,
parallel?
the 49th
between Canada and U.S. The
Yep.
hey, we're just going to pick this point, this line
in the west, that's true. It's not true in the east, but anyway, yes.
this longitudinal
Yep.
point off the coast of Washington, south of Vancouver. There's a little bit of a nub that sticks below
Just a small peninsula.
small peninsula. It's just like go west of Bellingham across Puget Sound area.
And a little north. Yep.
There's this little nub. There's 1,200 people that live on this little peninsula, and it's the U.S. territory, but it's a
not
suburb.
just territory. It's part of the state of Washington.
Sorry, it's the state of Washington, but it's a suburb of Vancouver. So like,
And you can't get there by land without going out of the United States into Canada and then back into the United States.
just
at
get
Point
your phone
Roberts.
out right now. Zoom in towards Bellingham.
Some of our listeners are
and
Googling
like
it now.
just scooch over Point Roberts or type that into your maps.
Yep.
Point Roberts, and it's about 1,200 people. It's tiny. There's a golf course there. Is why I became aware of it. They did this cool video. It just opened a couple months ago because 95% of the people that golf there are Canadian, and the border wasn't open.
And
the border
the
is
people that live there, I bet a bunch of them are probably dual citizenship and that kind of stuff.
yeah,
Probably.
because it's literally like if the Spokane Valley was Canada and Spokane was like U.S. Like we can't go, and there's literally just a road, and you look on the map like. So this guy in his backyard could just like walk across the road and go from Canada.
And
to
where
the
you're
US.
going with this is isolation.
Yeah, they were shut down for way longer.
You still can't get into Canada without being
Yeah,
vaccinated
it's
or
more open
tested.
than it has been, and so they reopened the golf course so the Canadians can come across the street and golf. But it's this. I had no idea that the state of Washington has this little nub that is basically Canada.
The more you know with Scott Langham.
The guy was like, "What? Why don't we just give this back to Canada? Like it would make more sense logically if it was Canadian and then
It would in some ways.
US." I
Thanks
have,
for that
no, I have
tidbit.
no idea how that helps us with following Jesus, but it's just when we talked about being in person, COVID
Yep.
shut down, the reality of relationships, the struggle in that community for the golfers to get together. I mean, they're like, "Are you kidding? Like a bunch of people just snuck on. Are you joking?" Like they golfed and snuck on. So then the one superintendent was like, "Well, if you're going to sneak on, you got to at least help us. We're going to try to mow it and keep it somewhat salvageable here in 2 years." So they were mowing greens and anyways.
Anyways,
Yeah, we're
I
designed.
digress.
We're designed to follow Jesus in person
And
with
if you'd
each
like
other.
help with your geography, tune into the Find and Follow podcast
go.
because we have tidbits
had,
for you.
had no idea. I had no idea. I mean, I was born in Bellingham. You think?
You were.
Think I would?
Well, you were too little when you lived there. Now.
Yeah, but I've lived in Washington,
Anyway,
Northwest
I think
for a while.
we're enough with port, whatever you said.
Yeah, it's super great. Anyways, my whole point of that is we're designed to follow Jesus together, not in isolation, not over Zoom, not separated. Like be with each other, to have people around us that we can be authentic with and more transparent with, and walk together, share life, pray for each other, encourage each other in the Lord. And it's just how we're built, how we're designed, whether it's South America, Point Roberts, Washington, or
UGM camp,
UGM camp,
or across the street,
Yep.
or in your own household.
Yeah. So, anyways, challenge this week to make sure you got some people in your life. Who you doing life with this fall, the next few months, where you've got some people around you that you're being able to live that way and follow Jesus. You got to be intentional about it. You can't just wander into these amazing relationships. You got to put effort and energy out. You got to be, risk it to be a little more transparent, invite people over, whatever the case may be. So, hopefully that'll be helpful for you, encouraging as you follow Jesus this week. We will talk with you real soon again on the podcast.
Jesus, you are my best friend. You will always be. Nothing will ever change that.
That's an old song.
No, nothing will ever change that.